and welcome to Comfort.
Well, thanks so much, Phil. It's good to be back. We were here about 3 years ago, and how's morale doing? How's everybody faring? You know, the year's shutting down. Bees do good. Yeah, they're still got bees, so can't complain. Can't ask for more than that, really. But I'm Sam Comfort. I run Anarchy Apiaries. I run about 1,000 hives these days, mostly based in New York and Florida. My bees stay put and I do the traveling now. I put 500 hives into winter in New York, and down in Florida I get to play with bees every day of the year. You know, so I don't really have an off season or a winter, so I'm very jealous of people who do. So it's a constant equipment crisis in my world. But I got into bees when I won my first 6 hives in a poker game. But that's not actually true. That's just the best story I've come up with. But really, I actually knew friends who knew beekeepers with 1,000 hives who said I could go to work getting stung for a living, park my van out back of the honey house, and within a couple months it seemed that all my friends were moving to Brooklyn in New York City, so I decided on a whim to move to Montana. I got a job with a beekeeper with 5,000 hives out of the phone book there. Spent 2 years doing migratory pollination. We did almonds in California, we did apples in Washington, we did all the cherry trees around Flathead Lake. After that I moved to Florida, worked for a beekeeper with 15,000 hives, and we did blueberries in Maine, cranberries in Massachusetts, and citrus in Florida. And these are the guys that were really having all the problems with their bees. You know, they wake up in the morning, they had to medicate their bees, they had to feed their bees, they had to move their bees thousands of miles in order to make ends meet. And it's really their hard work and their innovation that's enabling the food production in this country. The U.S. is a net food importer. We're not even feeding ourselves anymore. So what food we are actually growing is enabled by these migratory pollinators who, of course, they don't want to have to put antibiotics or miticides in their beehives. They don't want to have to feed their bees, but they see that they're on this wagon where they're going from farm to farm, that monoculture to monoculture, that is poisoning and malnourishing their bees. You add the stress of being on the road, it's really no secret why bees are dying these days. But the biggest problem that they'll tell you is that there's no young blood. Not a lot of young people coming into this industry to take on this mantle. It's just so difficult. It's so much work. And bees, these fragile, fuzzy, little beautiful creatures, are just so susceptible to this kind of farming that's really rough on them. But, so I knew that there was a lot of potential for change. I knew that I could find healthy spots that bees could stay, and over time I could just figure out my methods. But it really, you know, I knew that bees were going to be okay. I knew of hives that were living in buildings and trees that had gone for years and years without any management, without any supplemental feeding or hands of the beekeeper. And so for those reasons, I know that, and the fact that I know that bees have been around for 70-some million years, I figured that they're going to be just fine. I think they have the ability to solve problems. Maybe not the human problem, but they're working on that. So I don't see it really as CCD, not colony collapse disorder. I see it more like PCD, people collapse disorder. And really, us as a species, we would have a lot to learn from the bees. The bees being a catalyst for the whole world around them, creating diversified plants, a whole diversified ecosystem, thanks to their pollination work. Whereas humans these days are going into a landscape and just sterilizing everything into row farming or parking lots. And it's just it's very different from how bees are living. So these days, I'm a treatment-free beekeeper. I've been treatment-free for 13 years. I've also been raising my own queens for 13 years. And over those 13 years, I don't think I've ever done it the same way twice. So we'll talk a little bit today about what it means for me, like not treating my bees. I say I treat them nice, and how I go about sustaining my own numbers, but also making a living. I sell about 3,000 queens a year, so we're very, very busy at that. But you know, me saying that I'm treatment-free, it really doesn't matter to me whether you treat your bees or not, or whether you feed your bees or not, or really how you manage your bees. I run Anarchy Apiaries. Anarchy does not make rules for other beekeepers. So I don't care if you treat them or don't treat them, I feel that you ought to do what you feel you need to do in order to make ends meet and keep your bees alive. What I am interested in hearing about is whether you buy bees every year or whether you make bees every year. And if you're good enough at making bees, then you can start taking away some of the artificial crutches. Maybe you could try feeding them a little less so the stock you're propagating is more able to survive on their own and find their own food. Or then you can start weaning them off of treatments and find bees that are resistant to mites and all the viruses that those mites are vectors for. And you can also raise bees that are more suitable for your winter climate, more geared up for your honey flows when they happen, better temperament. Everything depends on the queen. So I run 1,000 hives these days. My long-term goal is to work down to 5 hives. 5 hives, a fishing pole, a hammock, and a network of us sustainable beekeepers with our 5 or 10 hives in our backyard who, in a bad year, say you lose half or more of your bees, you know how to split your survivors and restock your dead hives. And in a good year, you have an extra split to bring to your bee club, to give away to your neighbor, to have this be it forward mentality. And if we were all doing this and working with our own local backyard survivors, then we wouldn't have to rely on buying in commercial packages and commercial nukes. These bees come with mites, they come with diseases, and they're also usually coming from out of state, places that aren't adapted to like Oregon weather. So you're really better off working with your local survivors on any scale possible. So everybody here is part of what I see as the future of beekeeping, because this industrial factory bee farming model is by no means sustainable. These guys are hurting, their bees are suffering. We've had varroa mites in this country for over 30 years, and these days the mites are worse than ever. Whereas most academic researchers agree that if we never treated for mites right from the get-go, sure, there would have been this genetic bottleneck, people's wallets would have gotten thinner, but by now, 3 decades later, we would be over this parasite problem. The bees would have adapted. Bees have a grooming behavior. They're knocking the mites off of each other and biting them. They have hygienic behavior where they're able to smell an infested pupa and remove that bee pupa along with the mite that is infesting it before that mite can complete its life cycle and reproduce in that. So bees have these tools. Bees swarm. If the old queen leaves, you have a period of a couple weeks where no eggs are being laid and there's no brood in the hive by the time that new queen starts laying. The mites need the brood in order to reproduce. So bees, it's almost like they know what they're doing. Have all these tools to heal themselves. Whereas if you're using a treatment, you might kill 90-95% of your mites. That last 5 or 10% that survives will be more virulent and with a higher reproduction rate. You're breeding super mites and while you're propping up the weaker genetics of bees. And so the problem just escalates and continues where we are today. But you know, everywhere I go, every bee meeting, every bee conference is always, we're talking about mites, varroa, varroa, varroa. It makes me wonder if dog lovers go to dog conventions and spend the whole time talking about fleas. Beekeeping has lost a lot of its allure, a lot of its magic on this commercial scale. And whereas my beekeeping, I want to go out and maintain my sense of awe, my sense of wonder, my sense of amazement with these little magical creatures every day. So I've tried a lot to bring the fun back into beekeeping, and also make it sustainable by whatever means possible. Years ago, when I was building up my bee business, I taught myself how to raise queens by a grafting method, and it's something that I still use today. I brought a bunch of little drops of stuff here. So grafting is the process of taking a little grafting tool like this that costs you all of $2.99 at any bee supply place, and you can pick up a larva from a hive that you want to breed from. Say a hive that was showing, in my case, I was looking for resistance to varroa, that didn't show snot brood, this umbrella term that is often a varroa vector disease, or it could also be malnourishment. So hives that are able to survive on their own. With varroa, with global weirding climate, with the winters that I get in New York, which are often 20 below zero, but also bees that can build up in spring in time for the honey flow, that have good temperament, and all around just like a resilient bee. Because the way I see it, bees today in the commercial scale, they're going the route of other livestock, the route of cows, livestock that are hooked on antibiotics and supplemental feeding that can't survive on their own, whereas I know bees are still wild. They haven't been messed with until about the 1850s, and I still think they have this resilience, this ability to be wild. I still know many, many bee trees and bees in houses that don't need human management, whereas on this industrial bee scale, they sure do. You can't walk away without feeding or without treating. If you bought these commercial bees, you know that they're often one-season wonders if you don't treat them, if you don't feed them. And I totally recommend, especially if you have these commercial, Italian stock that's been raised for almond pollination, They're very different from having a couple hives in your backyard that you want to keep alive with minimal inputs. So I totally agree when people say that you ought to be aware of your mite levels, because these commercial stocks of bees just can't handle them. They're not raised for that purpose. They've lost that resilience, their ability to survive on their own. So what I was doing in propagating these certain genetics that I thought were surviving in the face of especially varroa mites, I could pick up a larva from this breeder queen and put it into a queen cup like this, and I use this push button slide to slide that larva into this queen cup, and then I can put a whole frame of these queen cups into a very strong queenless hive. I'll go into a very strong hive, I will remove the queen, I will remove all the other eggs and larvae so they have no ability to raise a queen, and then I can raise 30 or 40 or 50 of these little queen cells in that one hive. There's a lot of different ways to make bees, and I'll talk about a bunch of them through the course of this afternoon. But this, I found, was the fastest way to make a lot of queens very quickly, and anyone who's ever bought a queen or bought a nuke or bought a package, that queen 99.9% of the time was coming from this grafting process. So going in there, removing the queen and all the eggs and larvae, I leave them stressed out and sitting like that for a couple hours, and this is totally manipulative, invasive beekeeping like that. But this is means to an end to make 50 of these queen cells and then propagate the genetics. And so what I'm doing is using the tools that I've learned in the industry to kind of reverse the trend that the industry has had these last 150 years. This commercial queen raising has historically, for decades and decades, gone to more production, more honey, more money for the beekeepers. Whereas what I'm doing, and a handful of us treatment-free or survivor stock breeders are trying to reverse those trends. We're trying to just have bees that can once again survive on their own without all the manipulations and the feeding, all those artificial crutches that bees are quickly becoming dependent on. So I will pass around this little grafting tool and this little queen cup, and you can see how it works like that. This isn't something that you all need to learn if you want to propagate your own bees in your backyard. I've been raising queens for 13 years, and like I said, I've never done it the same way twice. There's many different ways to grow bees, and this is probably the most commercial, most productive one. Whereas these days I've been doing a lot of experiments of comparing those grafted queens, which the industry method that the beekeepers use, to just doing what's called a walk-away split. Taking a strong hive and splitting it in half. Whichever half is queenless without its queen will build the queen in her absence. Is anyone here not a beekeeper? Or is like brand new at this? So a couple of you, I'm throwing out all this vocabulary that's it'll be a bit to catch up, but a year from now, when you have your own bees and you're in your own situations, like, oh yeah, I remember something about this, I better read another book or watch another video. It's a very steep learning curve in beekeeping, so feel free to ask any questions, anybody at any time during the day. I can talk to you from getting a hive started in your backyard all the way up to doing what I do, raising 3,000 queens in a year. So there's as many different ways of keeping bees as there are beekeepers. And the cool thing about beekeeping is that there really is no recipe to follow. It's not like growing plants where you plant the seed, you water it, you weed it, and then you harvest in the fall. Beekeeping is by no means like that at all. And it's really, I can talk to you all day about it and tell you all the tricks and pointers. It's really not until you're there in your own hive, responsible for tens of thousands of little lives, that you're really beekeeping. So, but that being said, I really recommend you all go out there, open up your hives, see what's going on, and learn about bee biology. The whole trick of this is not being afraid of your own bees, and not being afraid to make mistakes. So, and like I said, I want you all to be able to split your own survivors as a viable future of beekeeping in this country. You know, so as I was building up my numbers, I had about 150, 160 little Langstroth beehives. Langstroth is the standard commercial model that all commercial beekeepers generally are using these days. I think we got a little one that we're going to open up here in a little bit. But I had a bunch of these hives, and they started to grow. I was raising my own queens from survivor stock, and this one spring I looked around, I had 150 little hives that needed bigger homes. They needed more boxes, and I looked around and I didn't have another frame or another box to put these growing hives into. And any money I had made working for commercial pollinators I had burned through at that point. I was pretty broke. So it was really at that time I stumbled onto the mission of Anarchy Apiaries. It's to bring the means of production back to the beekeeper, to make beekeeping a lot more approachable, a lot simpler, a lot more affordable, so more people could keep bees again and get into this awesome connection with insects and connection with nature. And I started thinking, like, how did it come to this? Because I knew that back in the day, a lot of the people kept bees. You talk to folks and everyone's grandparents or great-grandparents had bees. Every farm, church, and school, there were bees everywhere. You had dogs, cats, and bees. I think somehow they got replaced by televisions. Really, back in the day, you're done your chores at the farm, you still have an hour of daylight, you go and watch the beehive. It's the most exciting thing going on at the farm. You go and watch the different colors of pollen coming into the entrance. And how did we lose that? You know, how did it get usurped? Well, go back before Langstroth patented the movable frame, before he came up with this idea, this discovery of bee space, before we had these commercial style box hives. Well, everyone built their own beehives. Either you took straw and wound that into a straw basket called a skep, or you take a log and hollow that out and make a gum hive, or you just hammer 4 boards together and make a simple box hive. And this was done sustainably for thousands of years, and everyone had bees, but the bees weren't managed. They were kind of wild. They would swarm out to the woods. Sometimes they'd come back. Often people killed off their hives in order to harvest the honey. And a lot of those kinds of hives, even if you tried to harvest honey without killing them, you ended up killing them anyway. It was such a messy experience. But it was done sustainably for a long time. And there were bees everywhere, and they thrived. So then the Industrial Revolution came around, and everything was getting standardized, monopolized, and Langstroth had this brilliant discovery of bee space that changed the game. Now, instead of harvesting all the wax comb when you harvest the honey and just mashing and straining it, you could take that honey out in a frame, put that frame in a centrifuge, spin the honey out of the comb, and give that beeswax comb back to the bees. Now they didn't have to make new wax. They didn't have to secrete new wax scales from their abdomen every time they needed to store honey. So that wax production really slows the bees down. But you know, now they could spin that wax comb, give it back to the bees, and all those resources were turned into surplus honey yields. And it worked great. The commercial bee world was born pretty much overnight, and it went great for a couple decades until these contagious diseases started spreading from hive to hive, and then from bee yard to bee yard, the main disease being American foul brood, a highly contagious spore-forming bacteria which can't be killed. It's still the most serious bee disease in the country today. And it stays in the equipment for 70 plus years. You have to either irradiate it or burn it to get rid of this AFB, American foul brood. And so it changed the game for this budding bee industry to the point where everyone was losing their bees, and they had to start burning their equipment before their neighboring hives were affected, and every bee in the community was affected. So what the industry decided to do was put pressure on every state government to ban hives that couldn't be inspected. That straw basket, still what the public thinks of as the image of a beehive, is illegal. In most states in this country, it's been illegal for usually about over a century. Now, because you can't take it apart, look for the AFB disease, and put the hive back together. And so beekeepers were forced to conform to be legal, and the only model of hive that they were presented with was the Langstroth model. They didn't know of any other kinds of hives that were inspectable. They said you had to comply, you had to now buy this hive, and anyone who has bought a Langstroth hive, you know the cost that involves. It's several $100s just for the woodenware these days, and then you have to buy bees to put into it, and it's all precision milled lumber. It's very hard to build yourself. Well, everyone adopted the Langstroth hive. A couple generations went by, and all other methods of beekeeping were forgotten. Beekeeping went from this common, everyday thing that everyone had to what it is today. It's an esoteric, lost art. Even in the recent renaissance of beekeeping in this country, it's still a fraction of a percent of our population are beekeepers. We're in an extreme minority these days, where it didn't used to be the case. We have like less than half the bees we had even 50 years ago. So it was a brilliant ploy by the bee industry to like promote something that you now had to buy rather than make yourself, but it really was at the cost of the popularity and the experience of beekeeping. But there's now a new renaissance in the do-it-yourself hive movement. When I had all these hives and I really didn't know how, I didn't want to go into $40,000 of debt to buy the Langstroth hives and to grow my business. So I really had to look at some alternative models. And the first one I looked at was the top bar hive, which was made popular by the Peace Corps in the 70s and 80s in countries like Kenya and Ethiopia, where they couldn't get the precision milled frames of the Langstroth hives. It's basically just a trough that you lay sticks on, but it's a legally inspectable hive, and I can go in and rate the brood. And they still made a little bit of honey too, and is at the advantage of building a hive at less than $5 for a box. But really, you show me a dumpster these days, I can build you a couple beehives out of the contents. And that's literally what I did this morning, because I left my last box in California a couple of days ago. So I still keep a lot of these long horizontal top bar hives. I still have a lot of Langstroth hives, but the main model that I'm doing was based on Emile Warre's model that he came up with in France in the 1940s. Warre wrote a book called Beekeeping for All, and you can download this for free at biobees.com, and it's a beautiful book, great philosophy, and he tried hundreds of different kinds of hives, often a lot like me, until he decided, he finally called it the People's Hive. It really resonated with anarchy apiaries, beekeeping for all. And so, the hive that he came up with was like this one right here. These are Warre dimensions made by Bill. And so this hive was like a hollow tree. Warre would come twice a year. That's all that he did for his management. He would come in the spring and lift the whole hive up and put an empty box underneath. And then he would come in the fall and take a long piano wire and slice off the top box and harvest the honey that way. And there were bars in each box that the bees would just keep growing down all the time, just like an eternal hollow tree. And the entrances were down low, and bees, whether they're in a horizontal hive or a vertical hive, they're always moving their brood nest towards the entrance. That's where they can ventilate it the best, and they put their honey furthest from the entrance. That's where they can guard it the best. So with the entrance down low in a hive like this, or in a Langstroth hive, the brood nest tends to be down low, and the top boxes are filled with honey. So when you harvest that top box, you're also removing the oldest comb in the hive, and the bees are making brand new wax as they move their brood nest down. And just like a beautiful, elegant system like that. But Warre made it clear that you shouldn't open up the hive. It's 93 degrees in that brood nest. You don't want to take that top lid off and let out that whole atmosphere, because you'll damage the hive. The problem with this whole method, this method really resonates with today's new beekeepers, because they want to help the bee population, they want to save the bees, which I think is kind of presumptuous. I mean, bees don't need saving, it's humans that need saving. But this idea, just leave the bees alone. Bees know what they're doing. The problem is that today's beekeeping world is not the same as it was in 1940s France. Back in those days, they didn't have varroa mites. They didn't have all the pathogens. They didn't have changing weather, drought conditions in some years when the bees don't have enough food for themselves. They don't have the longer winters or erratic winter patterns. And despite all those pressures and those new stresses on today's bees, I'm also trying to promote people raising their own survivor stock and making their own hives. And this can involve just being there to catch your own swarms, but you can also simulate the swarms. You can also go in there and speed up this process and make a lot more hives in your backyard and propagate your own bees to the point where you'll never have to buy bees again. And so in order to do that, I really recommend going into your hive and actually managing it. The Warre hive is a pretty difficult hive to go in and actively manage and rate for health and stuff, because it's a pretty deep box. So I decided to change the dimensions. I am using a hive that's pretty much shaped like this these days. And thanks to Bill's scrap pile this morning, I was able to throw this box together for basically free. And I stapled in a couple bar rests into this box. I drilled a hole here and a hole here. And then rather than cutting the bars that the Warre hives did on a table saw, that's what I was doing at first. One year, after a couple years of doing this, I discovered this. This is the forefront of beekeeping technology. It is a barbecue skewer. Now I cut down to 11 inches, and they fit perfectly onto these bar rests that I slide into my modified Warre hive. And notice, I didn't make my Warre hive as deep as the original plans. His are about 9 to 10 inches. Mine are only 6 inches deep, so people have told me at this point I've changed the dimensions and I've changed the whole methodology, that I should stop calling them Warre hives and I should just call them comfort hives. Well, I'm not over that degree of pretentiousness yet to call them after myself, but I just call them box hives. But it's a pretty different beekeeping system, and that I like promote active management. I promote monitoring for diseases and mites, and also splitting your best survivors so you can propagate your own stock by going into your hive. So what I'll do these days, I have more of this style hive than any others these days, but you go into my bee yard, I have like 5 or 6 different kinds of hive designs, you know, it's anarchy out there. But what I'll do in a hive like this, I'll come in the spring and just slice all the boxes apart, put them each onto their own little screen bottom board like so, and I can slide in a little divider right between these bar rests and make this one box into 2. 4 combs here and 4 combs there, and at that point I will either give them a queen cell that I've grafted through that grafting process, or I'll just let them raise their own. And like I said, I'm starting to compare the commercial production method of raising queens, the grafting, versus the queens that they all raise their own. And I've actually been sending some of the resulting queens to David Tarpey's lab at North Carolina State University. He runs what he calls a queen clinic. You can send him a queen, and he'll get the morphometrics. He'll weigh every body part of that queen, and he'll go in and he'll dissect the spermatheca and actually count how many sperm are in the spermatheca to see how well mated that queen is, and then tell you the percentage of that sperm that's actually viable and alive. And then he'll give that queen a grade. She'll get an A+ or C- or something like that compared to the national averages. The problem is you don't get the queen back. And it's like, I know it's really crazy and stuff, but it kind of justifies like these different methods of queen rearing, and especially I've been using these, that data to show that the bees that are raising their own queens, and generally they're called emergency queens because the queen has been removed and the bees are in an emergency situation. We're trying to get away from that stigma of emergency. We're calling them bees' choice queens. But the bees' choice queens are grading now just as good, if not better, than the ones that are grafted by the commercial method. So I think there's a lot of hope in just raising your own bees without learning that grafting process. So I've got my queen operation. I'll go into a little bit of how I'm doing things on this production scale of raising thousands and thousands of queens a year. I have about 600 of these little tiny boxes, all in my mating yard, and I have 3 sections of my apiary. So I'll work this set one week, the next set the next week, and then another set that week. And by the time 3 weeks go by, I'm back into this first set. What I will do is I will catch the queen, I will put her in a little tiny queen cage, like this. I'll put her, she should be mated, she should have her own eggs in here and her own capped brood, so I know that she's laying fertilized eggs, that she went on her mating flight, she mated with 15 or 20 drones on that flight, came back, started laying fertilized eggs, which would become more worker female bees. The female bees, to let you know, are infertile females. The one mama is the fertile female, and she'll live for years in that hive. Whereas the worker bees, these infertile females, all that mama's daughters, they live about 5 weeks. They work themselves to death, literally. They'll live a little bit longer than that in the winter, but basically this queen, the mama of the hive, she's laying 2,000 eggs or so a day to replace this constant attrition of this worker population. So I'll go in here, and she should be laying brood, and should be capped worker brood, knowing that she was laying these fertilized eggs. And I'll put her in a cage like this, and I'll put 5 attendant bees, 5 other of her daughter workers in there to keep her warm, keep her fed. And every week I go to the post office with a whole stack of buzzing envelopes. You know, holes punched around, big words written on it, live queen bees, no heat, no sun. The postal employees, they think it's weird. I think it's weird. But I show up with a jar of honey every time I go, and the queens always tend to get there on time, usually. So I'll pass around this little queen cage so you can check out if you've never seen one of those. So I'll work this whole set, about 200 nukes of this 1 week. And then I will, let's say I get a perfect take on the mating. You know, the queen has to go out on a mating flight. She mates about a mile away from this mating nuke, this mating nucleus hive, we call it. And she could get eaten by a purple martin, she could get eaten by a barn swallow, she could get eaten by a dragonfly, she could get struck by lightning, she could get hit by a plane. It's like, it's very intense, so not all of them make it back. But let's say I get 100%, and 100% of those queens make it back and are laying eggs. So I will get 200 of those little queens in those queen cages. And also, these little baby hives are so small that they have to be cut back. I need to take some of the bees and some of the brood the young baby bees out of here to give them more room. So in a perfect take, I'm getting 200 queens, and I'm also getting 200 little combs of brood. So these combs of brood are what I'm using for the hives that are raising the queen cells when I'm doing that production grafting process. So for those of you who know queen raising, we call them queenless starter finishers. These hives are always queenless, and they start the cells and finish the cells all in this one box, and every week I just put more brood in. I've simplified this commercial grafting method of queen rearing into this weekly system. Every Monday, we put more brood in the cell raisers and we graft. We start the queen cells. Every Tuesday, we go to a set of mating nukes and we catch the queens and we take the brood out and we bank it for next week's cell raisers. We bank it above a queen excluder. And I know there's a lot of vocabulary for you, for a lot of beekeepers, but you can ask me what I actually mean, or I can go into more detail if anyone needs it. So on Tuesdays we catch queens and we bank brood for next week's cell raising hives. Then Wednesday we catch more queens, finish out those 200 nukes, and then Thursday those queen cells go in when they're ripe to replace the queens that we've caught. And so we let these little mating nukes, these little mating nuclei, we let them be queenless for 1 to 2 days, and then we put them in the queen cell. That queen cell will have a virgin queen emerge from it within a day or two. About a week later, she goes on her mating flights, mates with those drones mid-air, and comes back and starts laying eggs, and we just repeat the process every week. So once I came up with this weekly system, I realized that I knew what I was doing every single day of the year, and it took a lot of the stress and a lot of the thought process out of the beekeeping for me, and it really enabled me to tweak the system every week, try different methods of feeding, different methods of raising the queen cells, and so I could do little weekly experiments, and it brought a lot of fun into this production queen rearing. And it also enabled me to have more visitors because I knew what I was doing every day. And I started doing queen rearing workshops, advanced workshops for people who wanted to go into queens as a possible livelihood. So we would do this whole 4-day system. Graft on Monday, catch queens, and then put the cells in this self-contained system. Like I said, the extra brood is going to the cell-raising hives, and then those queen cells are going back to the mating nukes. And so, after 4 days, the students who had taken this advanced queen rearing, they looked at me and said, "This is way too much work. We're just going to buy queens from you." Like, this wasn't my intention. I wanted you to be able to raise your own so more people can do this, and especially like more people propagating survivor stock and healthier bees. And I realized that I really hit a wall and how simple I could make this production queen rearing. And so hence this last year I'm doing a lot more experiments with the walk-away splits, something that any beekeeper on any level can do in their own backyard. So especially if you're brand new into beekeeping or haven't gotten into it yet, I really recommend making splits. And you can make splits in your first year. And every beekeeper can go into their first winter with 2 hives and 2 nukes, 2 little baby nucleus hives. And let's say late season you lose a queen or something happens, you have a backup nucleus to drop into that failing hive. And your bigger hives might do better, your little nuclei hives might do better, but you're making backup bees at all times, like that. So you're gonna be able to avoid buying more commercial bees, which come from out of state, different climates, and they really come with these nasty mites and nasty diseases. Whereas over time, you know, you'll find that in raising your own queens, every generation they're getting stronger, they're getting more adapted to your environment, and also more adapted to your management style, which might be taking them off varroa treatments, might be adapting them to be ready for right when the blackberry flow hits in the spring. You might want to like change the temperament and just raise off your nicest hives, or the ones that do best in winter, or every characteristic in the hive depends on that queen. So raising your own, if you like the bees you have now, definitely take your favorites, and those can be the mothers for the next generation of bees you raise in your backyard. And everyone can do this and be part of the solution. So that's about the basics of my spiel and where I see beekeeping going in this country. And I think we'll probably sum it up with a song. Ray, if you want to come on up and help us out. We'll do a couple songs. You know, when the talk goes sour, I can really, try to save the day with a song, so. Let's do Varroa Mite Blues. You want to hear a song about our friend the Varroa Mites? And then I think we'll go into these hives if the sun stays out, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Does anyone have any questions about, we're going into a little bit into alternative hives, a little bit about advanced queen rearing, and I hope I made the point that it doesn't matter if you treat your bees or not, but if you're hoping to wean them off of treatments, every treatment-free beekeeper I know who still has bees alive also raises their own bees and grows their own bees. They have to go hand in hand. I'm all for tough love apiaries and making stronger bees all the time, but at the same time we gotta propagate those survivors. So, yep.
You put a metal divider in, just go all the way down because you put another hole on the other side so that the other bees can get in and out.
Yep, and yeah, feel free to come check out all the props that I have going on. But my little bottom board here, see, has the center bar, like that, so that metal divider slides down and hits that bar, and you just gotta give a good check and make sure the bees don't get around the other sides, because that one queen can get around that divider and kill all the other ones. You know.
Where's the entrance for the bees on the
Okay,
other side?
yeah, we've got an entrance on both sides, just like that. So I think a big hive and all the boxes have the potential of becoming a mating nuke, like that. But yeah, if you have a queen cell on one side and a queen cell on the other, that first one out can get around that divider and kill all the other queen cells. That's never happened to me before. My boxes are always perfect. So let's do a song called Varroa Mite Blues, I think. And then I'll go to questions, and as we're messing into bees.
We put a tune together real quick?
Yeah, give me, what is that, a D?
That's pretty good.
That's good.
I think so. Good number. She's a beekeeper in Michigan with about 50 hives of her own. She can answer your questions too. So if we want to shuffle around, the sun's still somewhat out, we can see what the bees are doing right here. I was curious if your bees in the stacker or just set it up. Yeah, yes sir.
I know in New York that Florida have bee inspectors.
Yep.
So what kind of, do you have any issues with your...
Oh no, they're buddies of mine. So
through my nuke system, like I said, I'm constantly dropping in an empty skewer. I do it in the middle, and they make it really into nice worker brood. I occasionally get one going askew, but these the vertical hives aren't as bad as the top bar hives, which can go askew, and then the next comes even more askew, and then you got a comb going across like 6 bars at once. You got to manage those a little faster. But no, my bee inspectors are buddies of mine, and I'm like totally above the radar. These days I get like trip permits, I get a DNA test on my bees, the queens that I raise in Florida, so they're certified European every year. But yeah, I maintain my hives so that I can actually get in there and work them and have everything straight on the bars. And they get a kick out of it. They love what's going on. So if this like enables more people to keep bees, any bee people are like all about it. So Yep, Bill.
So you say that you feel the bees build combs along the skewers. They don't cross comb as much on the skewers as they do on the flat.
I find that they don't. And how often I'm dropping an empty skewer in between 2 drawn combs, or I'm putting it right next to that divider, so they pretty much have only that one gap of space, and they'll make it a nice straight comb. Often when I'm under supering, like in a typical Warre type setup, I'll move a couple combs down, or I'll have like a couple straight combs as like guides that keep the next box moving down. Whereas Bill has been messing around with this Japanese style hive that only has cross spales, which isn't totally inspectable, but it's like a very, very simple way to keep bees without the intention of like removing the combs or opening up the hive, more of a Warre style. But I do like these shorter dimensions quite a bit more than these longer ones, because it's a lot easier to work. You don't get the side attachments that you do in a longer box like this. And so people ask me, like, what kind of hive should I make? Should I make a Kenyan top bar hive? Should I build a Langstroth hive or build a Warre hive? My answer is the best kind of hive is the one that you make yourself. We're all trying to establish this rapport with our bees and have this relationship with nature. You can further that relationship by building your own house for your little bee friends, like that. And like I said, it's all about having fun and keeping that sense of wonder and excitement and bringing that back even into commercial beekeeping, so more of us can do it sustainably. We got to make this fun. So yeah, well, thank you all for being part of it. Any more questions before we head to our bees? Yes, sir.
I do have a question. Do you find any difference in the quality of queens that are raised with a relatively small population, like in a mini mating nuke, as versus a larger situation where they're raised in like a queenless hive?
A big, strong queenless hive that I'd say swarmed or something.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Really, really good. And I've been doing experiments like that. If like a little nuke this size can raise a good queen, it does not take very many bees to raise a queen cell. I think it's around 200, 300 worker bees to raise a queen cell. If that queen cell's any good or not is the question. They get like thousands of visits when they're fed that extra royal jelly. What I found is that I used to take like a pretty good sized hive, and I would make it queenless. I would just like steal the queen out, like invasive manipulative beekeeping, and I would go in 10 days later and I would use the extra queen cells. Often they'll make 10 or more of those emergency queen cells, and I would disperse those queen cells into 10 nukes. I would find that the majority of those queens are not that good quality, and actually only 2 or 3 of those queens would be really, really good. And then David Tarpey at the Tarpey Lab did an experiment that the bees actually will chew down queens that are inferior. They don't have as strong a pheromone. The bees actually have a conscious quality control and are removing the cells before they emerge. Whereas I didn't let that happen. I went in and dispersed them all to their own nukes and found that some of those queens were actually inferior, even half-caste. They were actually like worker-sized queens, like that. So I changed that method of de-queening and going back in 10 days later. Now I just have a recipe. You can have your tiny box, put in a comb of eggs and larvae, put an extra comb of food, and a couple extra shakes of young bees. The young bees will stay there. The young bees are the ones that you want to feed that queen cell. And they'll often raise 5 or 6 or even 10 queen cells, but the best one tends to win. They'll chew down the inferior ones. I'll make that split just with the resources they need to make a queen, and I won't come back for like a month. Or 3 weeks to a month, and I'll come in and see if they pulled it off. And this is all about like giving a try, even if the queen's not as good, you don't need to keep her. She can just like hold the spot until you get another queen. I tend to do this like following bee biology, the bees like yearly cycle. I do this during swarm season when the bees want to be raising queens. And like usually it's before solstice when the honey flow is on and good. And but I mean, I really recommend that you all just give it a shot. If it doesn't work, you can always combine your hives. I also recommend you all go out there and don't worry about making mistakes, and don't worry about getting stung. You know, getting stung, making mistakes, it's like really the best part of beekeeping, because at least you're trying and doing something. I say if you don't get stung, the honey doesn't taste as sweet. You know? Yeah.
What's your favorite or preferred way of extracting?
Well, okay, well, my extractor with a hive like this, or with my top bars or worry, is a bucket and a stick. You know, so no stainless steel, no fancy extracting. I do have Langstroth hives, then I do spin those with a 2-frame hand crank. I guess my favorite method of that is getting college kids who work for honey. But extracting, it's always fun for the first hour, then it's really a chore. But I mean, I don't make a lot of honey, but I say that, but I make a couple thousand pounds of honey in a year. But I do not harvest from every hive every year, and I never take more than I think the bees can spare. Because I don't want to have to feed sugar. I will feed sugar, especially if I make a late split, or like the goldenrod flow fails in the fall, or like our weather is just like very, very weird. Our winters are starting later every year. You know, it doesn't get cold till December or January, and then winter lingers into May these days. So I do some supplemental feeding only like in emergency situations like that. But really, I'm robbing hooding honey. I rob honey from the rich and give that to the poor. I let bees like eat their own natural food. So, but honey is a sweet bonus, and I make a lot of comb honey that way. Cut comb honey. All under, I call it treatment-free, you know, sustainably produced, and things like that. It all comes with a story behind it. Yeah.
How many bees should you have right now in the 3-box storing on it?
Here in Eugene, I'm gonna defer to some of your local people. Beekeeping is all local, and there is no universal recipe for that.
It's also different between Eugene and where we are out in the country.
Well, my buddy Solomon here, he's in Medford. He can probably answer if you're south of here. He would know. I know for me in New York, I want pretty much 100 pounds of honey on that hive going into frost. Per bees?
I know how big your cluster needs to be to survive.
Good question. I've got all different kinds of bees. I have Russian bees that they all look like they're gonna die going into winter. Their cluster's very, very small because they've downsized. They stop raising brood like early, like right about now, end of September, October. The queen stops laying, so they have a smaller population, less mouths to feed through the winter. And these Russian bees, I think they're all gonna die. The cluster's only this big. I come back in 4 months and they're still all there, just waiting. You know, and they seem to eat no honey. They need a lot less honey through the winter. They actually seem to make honey in the winter. It's like they do not lose any weight at all, you know, for Mother Russia. But they're an extreme kind of case of bee. They're Russia, that Eastern Russia up to Siberia, you know, they're used to long winters in confinement. Whereas your Carniolan bees are not quite that extreme, but are a much better bee, probably for this climate. You know, they're darker bees. Russian, Carniolan, Caucasian bees are more used to here. Whereas your Italian bees, you know, right now they'll have 20 frames of brood and be starving. They turn all their food into more bees. This is what commercial pollinators want. They're losing their bees all the time. They want hives that are growing all the time to constantly make splits, replace their dead hives. And so they're used to, they've got, you know, gasoline nozzles hooked up to 500-gallon tanks of syrup, and they'll just keep pumping more feed in there because they just want to keep growing more bees every time of year. So they have bees come February for almonds. Totally different kinds of bees. So it all comes back to genetics of how big your cluster you want to survive and how much food they need. Is all the genetics. And so my recommendation is get a whole bunch of bees, you know, put them into your system, whatever size hive you want, whatever like size type, or like if you want medium frames or 8-frame boxes, put them in the system that works for your management. Plan on having some of them die off, and split your survivors. And you'll find immediately, that first generation, you'll see a big improvement in survival, adapting to your system. Bees are very versatile. They can survive in just about any kind of box, horizontal, vertical, but you just plan on adapting them. In a couple generations, you'll see a lot of improvement like that. So,
What do you do to winterize? You got this great installation of top of our hives?
just cross my fingers pretty much. I have to put on mouse screens, definitely, in my climate, so any entrance that is bigger than a ½ inch, I put on that ½ inch hardware cloth to keep out mice. And in my box hives, I really just put a couple extra layers of a shiny bubble wrap insulation, that Reflectex stuff. A blue foam board would be nice. But some people, like Ray, she'll wrap her hives with tar paper in Michigan. a similar climate to mine, and my bees go through 20 below zero. I've had top bar hives, horizontal hives, go through 38 below zero in the Adirondacks and survive, unwrapped. But they're Russian bees. Again, it's a genetic thing, and how much coddling you want to do, you know, wrapping, it's really as much work as you want to make it. So, but extra insulation, at least on the top, is a really good thing, because that warm, moist air can rise. If it hits a cold surface on the lid, that moisture can condense and drip down on the cluster. Cold doesn't kill bees, but too much moisture can. You'll have a soggy, small cluster. Yeah.
Are you using quilt boxes on your boreas?
Quilt boxes? I'm not, because I have about 1,000 of them. I've never actually done one. Bill, you use quilt boxes on your boreas?
What boxes?
A quilt box on top of sawdust.
Oh, definitely.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's where most of the heat lives.
Yeah.
Or the heat escapes.
Uh-huh.
You know, a Langstroth hive without that, it's cold and wet on top. I can, in the middle of winter or spring, I can reach into the quilt and it's warm and dry. That's a lot. They'll use a lot less stores because they're insulated so well. They don't have to work to stay warm. So it saves a lot of money and stress.
And this is a damp environment. It might be a really good idea. I mean, if you're on a scale with 1,000 hives, you might be like moving whole truckloads of sawdust around to do it. But if you don't know Bill Wood, he's here. He's local in Eugene, and he builds Warray hives, and they sell them here at the Backyard Farmer and stuff with the quilt box, I assume. Which, yeah, probably if I had the means, I would put a quilt box on the hive for extra insulation and wicking out that moisture. For those of you who don't know, the quilt box is really like a layer of burlap on the top of the hive, and then a whole box that you would fill with sawdust or leaf litter that works as a wick. It actually wicks that extra moisture out of the hive. Pretty brilliant observation by Warray decades ago. So
yeah. And I think its value, it doesn't, not so much that it wicks moisture out. It's just an insulator.
Yeah.
The moisture, if it wicks the moisture out, it eventually saturate.
Yeah.
But it couldn't take all the moisture from the bees curing the honey or their tablets.
Yeah. But again, simulating that hollow tree, you know, following bee biology. You want to be a better beekeeper, follow bee biology. And I don't try to convert you all to like do these alternative kind of hives, you know, like and keep bees backwards. But I will tell you, after like 5 or 6 years working as a commercial beekeeper with like thousands of hives, that first year I started messing around with Kenyan top bar hives, horizontal top bars, and the vertical top bars. The first year I started doing that and letting bees just develop in their own hollow space, left to their own devices, I became a much better beekeeper. I learned so much more about bee biology that I really was at an advantage. So I'm not trying to convert all you Langstroth beekeepers into a top bar type system, but I really recommend having 1 or 2 in your backyard just for comparison's sake. Your beekeeping will really benefit from it. You'll also have a lot of fun, just trying something different.
Those early Langstroth hives they wrote about had those boxes on the top. They call them chafe boxes or something sometimes.
Yeah.
So they showed little boxes about that tall on top of Langstroth, which was the same. It was just a quilt box.
Yeah. It's amazing, like looking back at beekeeping history, how diverse and like some of the hive designs are just crazy, you know. And like everywhere I go, I just try to promote diversity. You know, what works for me may not work for the next beekeeper and stuff, but like everyone ought to be trying all different kinds of things, because like it's in the diversity is where like the salvation of our species is going to be. So I think we need lots of different kinds of beekeepers doing lots of different kinds of management, and you know, 100 years from now none of it's going to matter anyway, but I think the bees are going to be just fine. But the more ways that we can learn from them, the better off we're going to be as a species. So. Anybody else? Yeah, should we go see some bees and see what they're up to? We're by vandals at some point in the summer, and it was on its side for a little bit, and he thinks that some of the combs collapsed, and yet hasn't really been back in since. And he said go for it. Just check them all out, but like no guarantees as to how they'll behave and what they're gonna do. But we're gonna see about getting a smoker and a hive tool, because wherever I go around, I always use like the local smoker, local hive tool. We don't move microbes or whatever bacterial diseases. There's over 8,000 different microbes in a beehive, and they're never in balance. They're just constantly balancing, you know. So disturbing that microbial environment with like, you know, different microbes from other hives is something we avoid. So I think we should go find Bill. Who's got a lighter? Anybody?
He went to get the smoker.
Okay, super. I guess we'll wait for the proper tools. Or going guerrilla style.
The flex parts.
Yeah, you think? You know, about 70 million years ago, you know, they were all like Hymenoptera, all like kind of wasp families to begin with, but the bees went vegetarian, and the wasps and stuff stayed carnivorous. And you ever seen them like eat a hive, like totally wipe it out? Yeah, sometimes.
Oh yeah, very easily.
Oh yeah, especially dry years. Yeah.
But it works though. It works for them. It works for the honeybees as well.
Yeah.
You know, the stock occupy different niches.
Yeah. I mean, like, well, once you start messing with bees, you realize kind of like yellow jackets do have a place, and mosquitoes have a place.
Absolutely.
All bugs do. That's why we like to say bees are a gateway bug. Yeah. All right. Let's see if we can get this lid on. So again, I don't know what we're gonna find once we get in here, but I do see that we have a tray underneath here that we'll be able to slide out and see what is going on. So you can have a monitoring board in any one of your kinds of hives, and you can often learn a lot about what's going on. Often you won't see Varroa mites because often they just drop down, crawl right back up there. But you might see them if they're chewed. There's at Purdue University, they're actually breeding bees that bite mites. Not only groom them off of each other through the grooming behavior, but actually will grab them and bite them. So they're looking at their monitoring boards, and they're counting not only how many mites have dropped, but how many mites are missing legs or have damaged exoskeletons, and they're breeding the bees that do that to really augment this biting behavior. So I use a little bit of those mite biter bees. I use a lot of the Russian bees that I talked about that are showing natural mite resistance through grooming. And I use a lot of what we call VSH, Varroa sensitive hygiene bees that were developed at the USDA lab in Baton Rouge. These bees have developed a really acute sense of smell. They're the ones that can really smell a pupa that's infested with a Varroa mite. And they will actually remove that pupa and the Varroa mite before it can complete its reproductive cycle. And so those VSH bees, that program's come a long way. And again, it's through this like very intensive inbreeding and like artificial queen selection. But they basically, in my opinion, they've solved the mite problem. That's what they say. They've solved the mite problem. The thing is that these bees are still a little bit OCD, and they're spending a lot of their time cannibalizing their own brood and kicking out their own brood. And so don't have a lot of free time to go make honey or grow to be almond pollinating bees. So a lot of these stocks, the VSH or the Russians, have not been adopted by the commercial bee industry for these reasons. And plus these guys, their chemicals are still working, but we don't know for how much longer. They keep on coming up with new chemicals once the old ones fail. So on this board, I don't see any Varroa mites at all. A couple of bee legs, a couple pieces of wax, and a couple pieces of pollen.
So you're saying there's healthy mites? They all ran up.
Yeah, they're athletic anyway. Yeah, I can't find a single one. Yeah.
Well, unless you sprayed it with something sticky, you will see it.
Yeah, unless they were damaged. But also ants will run in here and actually eat the Varroa mites that drop. But I was hoping to see maybe one or so to show.
Just so you know, that board was out all summer. I just put it in probably 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah, but I don't see any like natural mite drop here, so you might have to clean that. We'll see. Well, I'll slide it back on in for now. Actually, Ray, do you want to see if you can see a Varroa on there?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I see some.
Oh yeah, you saw it.
I've got one right here.
You want to show everybody in case they haven't seen a Varroa?
Let me get more than one if I can find it. There's also lots of little pieces of wax scales, which is kind of fun to see. Those fall out of the bees, essentially. They get dropped.
That's why like, beekeepers like me say, oh,
I'm
there's
like
no
right in
Varroa.
front
I
of
don't
this
see
hive,
any of them.
sorry.
They're all there.
Got one
Guaranteed every
here.
single hive in the country. Unless you're in Australia where Varroa still hasn't
Well,
taken foothold.
there aren't many of them. I might have only gotten lucky that I found one.
Yeah.
Okay, well, go ahead and open that. I have it on my finger here. That's about as big as a Varroa mite is. It's just like the head of a pin.
And we're all waiting for the next mite.
of
Yeah. So anybody who's never seen a Varroa mite, feel free to come up here and.
It's a little red tick that.
If you've never seen a Varroa mite, you're really lucky.
Yeah. Well, you're just not looking. That's the thing. They're there. Every one of my hives has them, but I mean, we're learning bees have to like
Oh,
learn a
there's
another
symbiosis in my environment, you know.
Here, got 2.
Well,
Yep,
doesn't
there.
everybody kind of have a load that they're comfortable with, you know?
Until their hive dies.
Yeah. Well, but then you're not
Yep.
comfortable anymore.
Exactly.
You're tipped.
Yeah. Well, I've never lost more than half, really, and I just keep moving ahead.
Nightmare fuel.
Varroa, I mean, we're all waiting for the next mite to get here, the
Let's see.
Tropolalops mite, which is the Asian mite that developed on the giant honeybee. The Tropolalops is about half the size of the Varroa mite. They say it's like Varroa on steroids. They say it's just
There's
like
some
vicious
like
on the
larvae
bees.
here.
They'll get here sooner or later. That's the next like major player. But did you all know? Did anyone see the research that the Varroa actually isn't sucking the blood on the bee? It's actually eating the fat bodies and chewing on the tissue. Turns out the Varroa, they are actually werewolves, not vampires. So this is all cutting edge research that just came out by Dr. Sammy Ramsey about a year or 2 ago, and mites have been in this country for 30 years, and we actually have never even looked at them to see what they're feeding off of on the bee. They're actually eating the lipids and fat bodies of the bees, not the blood, and so that's totally different than with them. Yeah, that's great.
Hey, there's some larvae on the board as well. Do you have an idea of what these might be? They're very, very small.
I have no idea. They look like little maggots to me.
Right,
Do we have a hive tool
Wax
somewhere?
Oh, okay, I just get one of those. Okay. Yeah, these here. I don't know. Anywho, I'm gonna get these mites off me.
Got the smoker. Waiting on the hive tool. The amount of gear, you know. I use a butter knife when I work my bees in those little box hives. You know, every year I get the bee supply catalogs, leaf through every page and say, I don't need that, I don't need that, I don't need that. I buy queen cages and I buy, you know, honey jars. Slide this on back. Ray, do you want to grab my marking pen?
I have it right
Okay.
here.
Do you have my queen cage?
No.
Any chance?
There's that. I'll go get the cage.
Thanks. Just in case we see somebody. So again, the history of this hive got kicked over at some point in the middle of summer. Bill, when did the hive end up on its side?
About 3 months ago.
Okay. For how long, you think?
It was overnight, so I showed up in the morning and
Just overnight, so hopefully not that bad. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, you got a lot of bees in here. So, I do use smoke on my bees, but I mean, this is like the amount of garb that I always wear, you know. I like not wearing a veil. I do get stung in the face, but, you know, like I say, if you don't get stung, the honey doesn't taste as sweet. But, you know, not wearing the veil, it keeps me focused. You know, I like getting stung. It's my favorite part of keeping bees. Now, beyond just its medicinal benefits, you know, reversing arthritis, reversing multiple sclerosis, it keeps me focused. The fact that I can get stung at any moment, it keeps me present. It keeps me like totally aware and like in the moment, you know. And it also keeps me going slow, where all my life I've been told to speed up all the time. So going to a hive, like just looking from the top, you know, I can definitely just read the bee's mood, but I use as much sunlight as I do smoke, because sunlight also very calms the bees very well. I think they absorb that energy and just kind of slow down. But we're definitely got like a full hive, like end to end here. So we got bees end to end, and that's always a good sign. But what I'll do is I'll go into the frame that I see has the least amount of activity. So I'll jump over here so you can see what I'm doing. As soon as I'm either this frame or this frame is going to be the easiest one to get out, and likely not where that queen is. You know, if I'm like really trying to find that queen and go on in here, I will jump right into the middle. But with a full hive like this, we'll start on the very end. We've got a little bit of side attachments on that first comb, so we're going to start with the second one in, and see, maybe the third one in has the least amount of attachments. Spread these out, get plenty of room here. And Bill, if I find your queen, you want me to mark her? Sure. Okay, cool. See if we're able to get in here at all without making too much havoc. Yeah, we'll go one more. It's a little bit straighter.
So, yeah, I think it was
They're very calm.
We're all like,
Super docile, yeah.
gonna keep going in to get one that's gonna come out a little easier. So, as with any hive, if you're trying to pull up a comb, you get like a light touch. You know, if you got any kind of resistance, you're probably best off pulling out a different comb. There we go. So if I'm looking for a queen, which I tend to do because I'm always like looking for queens, I will first not look at the frame that I'm holding. I'll glance at the next comb in. And then I'll glance at the side I haven't glanced at on the comb that I'm holding. And I'll look in a spiral pattern. I'll start from the outside edge and work on inwards. The queen tends to run away from the lights. So if she's on the edge, I'll see her before she runs around the edge of that comb. And then I'll glance at this side that I haven't glanced at yet. We don't have any eggs or larvae. We got a good population of bees and a good amount of honey, but the bees are very calm here, so we probably have a queen running around in here somewhere. But no sign of brood or babies yet. Which we'll just keep going through and seeing what's going on. The bees are shutting down their brood nests. There's definitely have less bees going into winter. She still should be laying something this time of year. So, since this comb doesn't have any brood or anything, we're not going to do any damage to have this on out, so I'm going to put it on down right here just to give us some working room, and we'll keep going through until we get into a brood nest. So again, I'm pulling this out and I'm looking at the next comb to see if I can see the queen's tail. We got a boy bee. I got a drone in my hands. No sign of any mama just yet. So, has anyone not seen a drone yet? This is a boy bee. And you can tell it's a boy from the big eyes. See the helmet? His head almost looks like a helmet. See right there? He's got this rounded butt. So these bees, the boys, about 20% of the hive in the middle of summer, they don't raise young, they don't harvest honey, they can't even feed themselves, and they don't have stingers. There's one good thing that they're good for. Okay. that freaks kids out when I do that. I try to make sure I get one that's like flying age, because sometimes they'll just like dribble out there with a bunch of spit. But I probably just made that little guy's day. He's like, what the heck was that? It's all right, but I won't. Now that he's not here anymore, I'll tell him that he probably only has like a couple of weeks to live. Every frost or so, first frost, you find a pile of dead drones out front of the hive. They are expendable. They are not kept around the hive. Still looking for signs of a queen because we don't have any brood yet. But they're calm. They're not acting queenless, so you might have a queen that either is just getting mated or she just stopped laying for a couple of weeks. But
so this was from that moray that swarmed off.
Okay.
And it swarmed from there to that tree, and then from the tree into here.
And you got this one. Cool.
May. The end of May. 1st June.
Well, you very well could have a virgin queen. Yeah, no sign, no eggs yet. And also no pollen. But they're calm. They're not running around like they're queenless. Have you ever seen them like agitated, kind of jittery when they're queenless? There's kind of a roar to the hive. These don't have it. These are calm as can be.
And they haven't even.
What did you say about pollen? Is there any fresh pollen?
I don't see any pollen. Fresh nectar though. I think that I think they're making a little bit, but we might find some brood in here or like some fresh eggs here yet. We'll see. So these were a swarm, you said?
Yeah.
You should see like an old one maybe that emerged. Haven't seen anything like that yet.
My bees this morning, the incoming bees were really pollen laden.
Oh yeah? Not here, not yet. We're going to try to get through as much as possible. This is from definitely a tip when they fell over, but they repaired it in good style. kind of beautiful when they aren't all straight and factory, cookie cutter.
So he's really good at the diagnostic to make a report.
They will put some of them just as a result of that. He normally sticks up in the
What do you think, Solomon? You think there's a queen in here? Yeah, there are quite a few dead bees. Yeah, I'm just seeing that now. Well, there are a few dead bees on top, and he said that there was a bit of a spray issue, he thought, with the other ones. You see that?
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, Bill, take a look at your bottom. Yeah, so that's not normal. They're fighting with the yellow jacket right there, but this is from some... do you have any California buckeye here? Do you know if that grows native? That's because that's a toxic plant to bees, but I think that's a June bloom too. It wouldn't be affecting them right now. I'm a little concerned that this might have affected your queen, but it would have been 3 weeks ago because you have no brood being left. But we'll go through.
Well, that other hive did die about 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Where they were spinning around.
Okay, well I got nothing on the sidebar. I think it might have killed a good population, whatever happened to them. Probably killed all your older bees and possibly the queen. And now all these bees that are in here currently are just the young brood the rest of the brood that hatched out. And it's hard to say if they were able to raise a queen or not. We'll keep going through here. The fact is still that they're very calm. So that's a good sign.
I was going to say, keep looking at me for good reason.
There's also not much foraging there.
Yeah, just some confused bees. A bunch of cookie cones. Okay, I think I freed this one up enough. No. They're super calm for being queenless, though. That's the thing. I'm looking for signs of a queen cell, that they raised one, but not seeing any yet. At this point, this late, they could have chewed it down. I don't know if this is going to come up or not.
Yes, that's it.
The whole messy stick. This frame is not going to come on up, but we can jump past it, I think. So, they definitely have plenty of food.
I would say around here this is enough for a frugal hive to survive winter.
It's plenty of, yeah. I mean,
We don't need a whole
this frame probably weighs 10 pounds, 12 pounds of honey. They got plenty of food, but they need some brood right now.
We have a very mild winter.
I'm looking for a virgin or at least an emerged cell and not seeing it. But they're so calm. They're not roaring at all. I think it's called because it's just that they're all young bees on a little bit of a flow. I think they might be truly queenless, is what my guess is. And they're just, all the old bees are dead. This is all the recent hatch. I think they might be queenless. So, you gotta go into the warrior hive, cut out a little bit of eggs, drop them in here. Go into the warrior hive and like hack. Well, if it saves this one, oh, I gotta look on the sidewall. Otherwise, the queen might be running around if there is one. All right. Well, you want to tell everybody like what happened to the front hive about 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, so the front hive was a small swarm I captured last June. It overwintered real well. It looked real strong. Top box was filled plenty. The center box was pretty much filled, and then they swarmed off again, probably in a guess, July or so. They probably swarmed 3 or 4 times, one of which is right here. The odd thing is the bottom box only had like 1 or 2 bars of comb, partial comb in there, so not really sure why they decided to swarm. But if you look at the box up there, once the robbers cleaned it out, you could see the cells, the queen cells. And then I came out here one morning and there was a lot of robber activity and a ton of bees, like thousands upon thousands of bees crawling around on the ground. And they were kind of walking and they're crawling in a counterclockwise motion, kind of twitching. Kind of made me wonder if maybe they're exposed to some kind of neotoxin. I did scoop up a whole bunch of them and I have them in the freezer. I guess I should see if I can use that as a sample and send them out to somebody to see if that can do something. But the fact that so many of them died so quickly in the same manner makes me think that they got exposed to something. So as a result, I have noticed some pretty significant, not everywhere, but there has been some extra activity with these hives, making me think that they were being robbed as well. So I put on the mouse guards. I'm really curious to see what's going on with that.
Well, you know what? What would be interesting to do? I think
Sealed up.
pop this off the box.
Cells are sealed.
Dig around in the pile of dead bees that's on the bottom.
Finished.
With everybody, but there could be a virgin queen, which is virgin queens are about the size of a worker bee, so she can be pretty hard to see, and they tend to run really fast away from the light. There's also a chance that she's out on her mating flight right now. She's out on an extended days.
How long does a mating flight last?
It depends on how far she needs to go. You know, she's looking for a drone congregation area. The drones fly every day, like 10 o'clock to about 2 p.m. And it's basically they're like hanging out on the street corner up there. They all kind of gather in a big cloud about 100 yards up in the sky, and they just wait for a virgin queen to fly by, and they all just chase her. And only the quickest win. You know?
You've got a bunch of stuff on the bottom.
Yeah.
Does she fly by herself or does she have a company?
Good question.
Because
that's
it seems
been
like
debatable. Yeah.
It seems like that's when she's the most vulnerable. She probably should use some,
exactly, and we
bodyguards.
We hope that like 80% of them make it back. You know, but like when there's a good honey flow on in spring, like we get 90% or more back. But yeah, a lot of researchers do believe that there's like a mating cloud or a mating swarm that follows her on out and kind of protects her a little bit. But she is like the slowest moving, juiciest bee.
I heard that she does not make drones from her own hive. Is that accurate?
That's why she goes on this mating flight. She will go about a mile away often. So like in one of my bee yards where I'm raising queens, I'll put another bee yard about half a mile in every direction, if possible. And I also give a lot of my queens out to my friends to try to keep the genetics my own. You know, you can imagine if you're like grow cattle, you know, imagine if the bulls had wings. Like what a mess that would be if you're trying to raise cattle like that. So it's really like made bee breeding like almost impossible until you know a lot of people who are really like trying to breed bees are doing instrumental insemination. They're actually getting semen and inseminating the queens in the lab under a microscope. Okay, so this was the only lid of the thing, right? Oh no, this is the lid right here. So we're gonna put a lid on, and I'm just gonna pop this whole box off of here, and we can rummage through. There's a good pile of dead bees that we believe was a result of a spray kill, I imagine. So we'll, you're stapled on here like a little bit. Please, a little small.
Very good.
Yeah. So I recommend that you all wear veils and use gloves, and if that's what makes you feel comfortable, don't get scared of your bees. And like I said, I like getting stung, but you'll see like, yeah, how deliberate my movements are, how it's all kind of like a Zen practice, you know, slow, deliberate movements, and it takes some time, you know, to like really learn how to move around your bees, like so. So I'm just peeling this mouse screen back, and we're gonna look at the bottom of this hive and see let's see what we can see. we go. Smoke here from the front. It's plenty heavy. Yeah, no side. There we go. Nice. Mechanical. Yeah. So, not normal, you know. This is something that you might see like after a winter kill.
What are they all doing running around down there?
These are all young bees. They're down there like cleaning up the honey and stuff. Any mosquito spraying? Do they aerial spray for mosquitoes in this town? I mean, because like
Not that I'm aware.
they do in Florida. And often we don't see.
City of Eugene also does.
Yeah, they're pretty. There were those issues with like the linden trees, right? That like that were killing.
There's concerns.
Good.
I mean, somebody knows.
Actually, it was bumblebees.
Yeah. Probably a degree of honeybees too, but honeybees, they just didn't find honeybees. They found tons of bumblebees like in the parking lot and like right by the trees, but the honeybees dominated that.
Doesn't linden produce a trisaccharide that's hard for them to digest?
It does. It's a native tree, as honeybees aren't a native species and stuff, but still it can produce quite a bit of honey that they will get anyway. It can be a major honey flow that doesn't seem to bother them. Almonds are also like a slightly toxic adults, but I don't see any queen. Maybe you want to give me a second pair of eyes? Where are my queen finders?
She's real good.
She's not going to be really big right now. But I was just looking, thought that maybe we would see her down here because she sure isn't in the hive laying eggs. But
Well, I guess you'll have to mark her.
yeah.
So bees are collecting nectar from toxic plants like oleanders or something. Does the honey become toxic, or does it?
Certain honeys do, like rhododendron honey will be not toxic to the bees, but like toxic to humans and stuff.
It's very hallucinogenic.
There's like those. There's a history of like the Greek army leaving out toxic honey for the Roman army, and they got all sick and crazy, and then got slaughtered. And biological warfare, you know.
So my 50 rhododendron plants.
It's not the same.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna give up on this. We're gonna try to keep it interesting for everybody. She out front. Shall we dump these out? Yeah. Well, it's good to know because you might have a queen, and if we got a laying queen in that worry, we might cut out a little thing of eggs so they can raise one, and we might save the day and die that season.
Yeah.
Toxic to horses.
Yeah, it's just
yellow flowers.
There are a couple drones in this hive.
Yeah, just not.
So, I mean, there's still a chance to, thanks. And they have plenty of food. So I'll go like a little catty corner and just slide like that, avoid hurting feelings. You know? Scoop. All right. So shall we do like an invasive, non-worry inspection on the worry hive and see if we can get a little bit of eggs? Bees can build a queen if they have the resources, and like a queen can lay an unfertilized egg, which will become a boy. The drones don't have fathers, but if they lay a fertilized egg, that fertilized egg with two sets of chromosomes will become either a stunted queen, a worker bee, an infertile female, 90% of the hive, or it can also become, if they feed it extra royal jelly, it can become an actual queen, like that. So they will build a queen in the absence if they are given a fertilized egg, which if this one has a queen, maybe we can go in here, cut out some eggs and young larvae, and just pin it into this hive. They could raise a queen, and they still have time because there's still drones here. She can still go on a mating flight, but we'll see what resources we have to work with, you know? This way?
That's a fact. And it would also mean that the main workers would start.
Oh yeah, we got side windows here, right?
So what it would do is that it would put off those workers.
Let's see what box we're gonna go into. I don't know about this one.
That's great.
Yeah.
There I see some bees. One.
There are some bees, but
That's right.
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we're gonna find in here. I do not see any brood.
Because they were just wandering around, doing nothing.
You never know.
It's kind of okay. They're just wandering around.
Winnie the Pooh said it best. You never can tell with bees.
You never can tell.
So I'll start. Maybe we'll look down at this bottom one. What do you think, Bill? What would you do in this situation?
What's the situation? I'm sorry.
Well, we think we're queenless over there. We think that the spray might have killed the queen and stuff, and no signs of a queen cell, no signs of a virgin. Still like a good enough population, still a couple drones actually in there that they could actually raise a queen, but they need some like a comb of larvae or eggs to build a queen. So I don't even know if we got one in here. It might be the same situation, but there are some bees in here. So I'm thinking about going in this bottom box first and see if we can save that one, just with a little strip of eggs.
Can you?
I don't know.
Could you? Would you have to wire something over?
Maybe.
Or tie it on?
I just need I need one larva, just one little cell, just like a little plug like that, sticking between frames like that. So let's try it.
So how are we going to attach a top bar here to a frame there? We're going to wire it, or
like an empty frame? Yeah, we could maybe. Ah, nice grab.
Was this hive knocked over also?
No, it was just
that one.
Yeah, they were going over there to steal my chicken plucker. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So if there's some string, I mean, we could, like cut out, probably tie. Who's good at cutouts here? Steve left. Steve
I am, but I don't want to say.
I don't.
I'm gonna see if I can wedge this box apart. It's all one big experiment. Looks like we're definitely not going to have any brood down in the bottom.
That's why I'm not.
Well, you got all this like terrible stuff we're doing to get these babies.
Well, I don't lift it up. I'll turn it. I'll twist it, and that breaks it.
I'm going to inch it up before, just an inch forward.
I think
I'm just doing that on purpose.
Some are still.
That's getting perfect. That's what we're looking at.
Oh no, I got both. But okay, so we're gonna lift this back for everyone to see, and we should be able to see if, from the bottom here if we're gonna have some brood.
We should head better out. Sorry.
Yeah, we got some. We got some brood right here.
Do you want to walk
I can see it just on this one comb from right here.
Oh, in there.
Yeah, right here.
You got brood.
Yep. We got we got brood right here and right here. We got some resources to work with.
Okay.
Which means it's gonna be okay.
All right.
Probably.
Right? Just some minor surgery we gotta do. It's gonna be alright. This is the first time I've ever worked in actual work. We'll smoke. Thanks. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna drop this one here. Boom. Smoke, so you're gonna get stung. Alright. Yeah. Side attachments. Not doing
You're
that.
there.
You're right.
Try to get this out to on in here. There we go.
You gonna set the whole comb in there?
Nah, I just need a strip, you know? And I don't want to hurt the resources from this side. Not this time of year. Springtime you can get away with a lot more. I just want to take a little bit of larva. Okay.
I know. Oh wow, look how perfect that is.
So here we are doing what Emile Bourret said exactly not to do. Doesn't look great. Actually, she's just laying in the, yeah, nothing but drones. Can you grab that? Got some shriveled wing.
Here's a row Mite on a bee. Sam usually likes to show this off to people just so they recognize that, but here's a bee with a Mite actually on its thorax here. Some of this brood here, so there's brood here.
There's some on that one, but not on the.
This is a sign of disease resulting from Mite in its head.
This cone is not
It's very dark, shrunken, immature.
That's ready to detach.
Yeah. Well, it's still attached to the side, so I'm not going to pull that one, but this one will come out pretty easily.
Yeah.
Minor surgery. It's amazing how much they put up with.
I should have brought my knife,
Your long.
that hook knife.
I think we'll be all right.
This is contracted from Varroa. Varroa vector many diseases to bees. So here's a bee with a mite on it, and here's a bee with deformed wing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Never
And
seen
so,
that.
so they're developed in a way that they cannot fly.
Which rather ruins the whole aspect. Did you want to see the one?
So here's another bee with deformed wing here. Another one looking a little rough. Sure. So here's deformed wing here. This bee here. You see how her wings look like they're just chewed right up. Yeah. Here's a young bee, very very small. Here's a mite on a bee here on its abdomen.
Keep holding on to that if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to pull one more. I'm not
Did you
finding.
get to see this? Sticky.
And the other one.
No, don't get sticky.
Already.
Minor surgery. Alright. Got one little clump that I might have some work with.
I don't think
It might have to go into the top box. So.
No, maybe not.
This that's all done. Okay, so let's leave that in here. See if this little clump. Anything to work with on here? Yes. We got some eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, this probably isn't like a breeder hive, one that whose genetics we with because they got some mites going on, but this will make a queen that'll hold a place and probably get that thing through the winter.
Anybody want to taste some honey while I have this? It's
But that's how they do it.
I'm gonna put this in just like that. Get that out of the sun. Because UV kills. Put this. Let's put that in right here. Thanks, bees. Thanks for the resources. You can save your neighbor's life. Thank you.
Okay, well, I might set up two.
I'll go through that top box.
No.
That's pretty.
I mean,
I got sticky.
Me too.
stretching myself through
Okay,
What's it
scoot.
look like on the bottom?
Bottom of this one?
Yeah.
Bees and honey.
It's nice. Yeah, we got some better looking capped brood and stuff up here. This is probably where our queen is. I actually might leave this aside.
Well, then they'll have plenty.
Yeah, they're heavy. Thanks. Again, I'm scooting in the corners and kind of pushing them out of the way. Avoid hurting their feelings. Alright. Okay. So the lesson learned. Between. Lesson learned is always have more than one hive, because we had one that might be hopelessly queenless. In this case, it's not even anything that a beekeeper did. It's probably some environmental toxin or something like that. But we got the resources that they need right here. Just get some smoke as I pop this lid.
Yeah, and there's people around.
So how long would you wait before you checked?
Probably be about 3 weeks. Just like don't even mess with them. Either they're gonna pull it off or not. You know. We still got time.
Which you should also mention that even if you do this to this frame, if
I hope they do.
Yeah, so even if there is a queen, like or a virgin queen, or if she's out on a mating flight, in that case they just won't raise queen cells. And then either way the problem's gonna be solved. But I got a hunch we didn't see any queen cells, and because of the amount of dead bees on the bottom and the history of that front hive like going down, it's I think this was the best course of action to.
So,
do you want to
No, I think
fruit. All you care about is there. And then they'll choose somebody. And there's no brood.
yeah, I'm not gonna pull that over the way.
And there's very little
Right there.
pollen. There's only one frame of honey. I mean, they're collecting so perpendicular. There isn't that much available right now. So it's sort of a, yeah, it's not that's.
Spread this one out.
It'll be very interesting.
So he's attaching it perpendicular so they can get to it from
So
the
I
top
tucked it in.
Squished it in there?
Yeah, but in a vertical orientation, just like so. So you want to come back in here in like 3 weeks or so, check that thing and see if they actually drew queen cells from it. They should. We'll probably draw several, and the best one will win, hopefully. And then hopefully she gets out in time to mate and stuff. But she won't be actually raised and out of her cell for another 12 days or so. You don't really want to mess with her while she's on her mating flight, so I'd give it at least 3 weeks.
Right. That makes sense.
So it's all very exciting.
Always something.
Good. All right. Well, we used the Worry hive to save the Langstroth hive.
No, and it's not textbook either. See, I thought it was.
And well, you always learn more when stuff goes wrong than like when everything's perfect and stuff. So we all got a little crash course.
And vice kind of like what you did for mine.
Do you have any recommendations for PMS?
Do you? Yeah, at this point. Yeah, prevention's key.
Crab syrup, which is kind of.
You at this point have better recommendations than I do. Because yeah, I got thousands of hives. You know, I would just Darwinian it in soapy water.
So how many people here are treatment-free beekeepers? How many people are biodynamic beekeepers? Do we have any biodynamic beekeepers? Okay.
Define that.
I'm not a biodynamic beekeeper myself. I don't think I could do a definition justice. But however, if you follow the calendar, Bill, our good friend Bill, who was just here, he's a biodynamic beekeeper. He does believe in intervention of varroa in the hive using formic acid and oxalic acid. These are organic acids found in the environment. Formic acid is produced by ants and other hymenopterans. Oxalic acid is found in tons of vegetables and weeds and things that we encounter on the daily.
Rhubarb.
Rhubarb, you know, the sour taste of rhubarb, it's oxalic acid that you're detecting. These things are really helpful in intervening when you have a mite problem in a colony, and they've been shown to help colony overwintering success. Now, if you're a treatment-free beekeeper, there are lots of other ways that we can manage Varroa. We can manage mechanically. We can get good genetic stock, like Sam was talking about, getting good Varroa-sensitive hygiene bees. These bees are amazing. I have some of them myself, and I'm amazed at how few mites they have. So I definitely recommend getting some good stock into your bees. But also drone brood culling is a way that a lot of people, I mean, all of these tactics to help control Varroa, they are invasive, and if you're a true dyed-in-the-wool Warre beekeeper, you're not going to be intervening very much in the hive. You're going to go in the hive twice a year, right? But Varroa is very real, and hives have it, as we just witnessed. And so in these cases, we could have a chemical intervention, which if you're thinking about that IPM triangle where the tippy top is, you intervene using, you know, the big guns. But hopefully prior to that, we can do mechanical intervention. We can remove drone brood. Varroa love to accumulate in drone brood, and if you're not breeding lots of queens, you probably don't need your drones very much. So this can be an entire lecture on its own about what to do about Varroa. It's very complex. There's a lot of disagreement in the field about what to do about it, obviously. But I just thought I should mention, we just witnessed parasitic mite syndrome. We witnessed deformed wing bees. Bees that don't have properly developed wings can't fly, they can't forage, they're compromised. This colony is probably going to struggle getting through the winter because it's very sick. And so some kind of intervention, I would say, would be needed. Or you can go the route, which is generally the route that Sam goes, is live and let die. You let your survivor stock determine what you're going to have in your apiary next year. Who survived? Okay, let's breed from them. There are lots of ways to do it. There's not just one. Sorry, this is not my show, but you know, Sam said, I don't know very much about treatments. Will you say something? So,
what about the, you know, make your own powdered sugar, and then they'll clean each other off mechanical
that's a
treatment?
thing you can do. That's a thing you can do. It's not as effective as other methods, but if you are doing it as a preventative, I think that's pretty good. It might only knock down a couple mites, but if you don't have a mite problem, hey, a couple mites dropping on your bottom board is better than none today.
It seems like they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Sugar.
And you know, they get to consume some sugar, so why not? There are ways to check your colony for mites. Who's here ever done a powdered sugar roll or alcohol wash? All right, you guys should watch some YouTube videos about that. I think that it's a really important tool to have in the modern beekeeper's toolbox. Just learning how to get half a cup of bees, which comes out to be 300 bees.
That's hard to do in the Warre, is getting the scoop
Absolutely
of
it
bees
is.
that you need.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good point. I'm not a Warre beekeeper myself, and so I can't speak to that as well. Maybe Warre beekeepers, do you guys monitor slider boards?
Yeah,
do you
that's
monitor
one way to
mite
monitor
drop?
them.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
and then we did the sugar, we did the homemade, you know, make your own, because the other stuff's got
Yeah.
bicarbonate in it or whatever. So we got some organic sugar, made our own powdered sugar, did the sugar shake, and got a few mites off of them.
There's a bunch.
well, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Way to go. Maybe you could come here next week and teach everybody to do what you did.
Well, then we did the mineral oil and the top mineral oil with thyme, essential oil.
Okay, yeah.
Spray on the paper towel, you know, grit on the top.
There are lots of miticides, natural and non-natural, of all kinds out there with controlling mites. And for some people, that's just not the route they want to go. They want to split their bees. They want to have brood breaks. They want to requeen. They want to get good genetics. There's so many ways to do it, but this is like a lifelong learning sort of thing. We're all learning what works in my locality is not what's going to work in Eugene.
Right. What about keeping the screen open in the wintertime versus closing it off?
Now, I
Well,
can't
in
speak
any
to that.
climate. in your climate, what do you do?
I put slider boards in, but one of my mentors does not. She thinks it's really important to keep it open.
Wow.
We
In
both
Medford-
overwinter bees.
In Medford, I use solid bottom boards all the time.
So
Okay.
wood?
Yeah.
I mean, you're sliding wood in there rather than...
I don't have a screen at all. It's just solid.
Oh,
bottom
solid all
boards.
the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I mean, I use the term treatment-free, but the term I like even better is treatment-free but not stupid. You know, getting a sense or having a plan. You know, if you lose your hives, if a hive crashes for mites, it can affect like the neighbor hive, mites drifting and stuff. I'm not worried about this hive being infected by that one because there's no brood or active laying queen, and there won't be for another couple weeks until they raise one here. But today we saw a little bit of the good, the bad, and the bugly. So I like to say, but it's always more interesting to learn from stuff when there's a challenge or something to do than to see it when everything's perfect and okay, because these are probably all issues that you will sooner or later face if you're actively opening your hives and monitoring, getting a sense of what is actually going on and trying to diagnose, do an autopsy, you find out why your hives died, and often it's a case because of disease that's vectored by varroa mites. So again, as Ray mentioned, there's like a lot of different tiers of like an integrated pest management, the main one being like first starting with genetics. Mites, bees that are proven to like have cleaned up mites that have made a lot of advances in that, especially in recent years. So if you're gonna get some bees, definitely look for that varroa sensitive hygiene or Russian bees that have like a known track record now as your first line of defense. And then if you don't want to make your beekeeping neighbors angry of causing what the people are calling a mite bomb, you know, you might want to have a sense of the health of your hive, especially as it goes into winter before the first frost. And there's a lot of different tiers of what you can do. But, you know, inform yourself as a beekeeper about what's going on in your backyard and your bees, and you'll probably find that you have a lot more success and just know all the tools in your arsenal to do this. But my main one is genetics and my ability to know that I can propagate bees and make splits and have those backup hives going all the time.
And wear bees on your head.
Decorative bees.
Yeah.
So you probably have a lot more challenges with your bees, or maybe not, in Florida because there's not really the change of seasons going on. Or
Actually, it's the opposite
Just
way
the
around.
opposite?
You know, I will typically use 20 or 30% in New York. And going into winter, is incredibly stressful. Bees are actually a tropical creature to begin with, and they've evolved to live up in even in Siberia, Scandinavia. You know, and I'll lose 20-30% of my bees in an average winter in New York. There's no average, there's no normal anymore. Also, it's just that winter stress. Everything has to click just right. I mean, mite levels do need to be low, and disease levels need to be like almost non-existent for a hive to make it through. But then those ones that make it through are like gold. They're amazing. That's survivor stock at that point. Whereas Florida, we have bees everywhere. They swarm every month of the year. They always have food to eat, and as long as they're like not by like pesticides, which are rampant down there, they really thrive. Every like third house has a wild hive living in it. Bugs rule. Down south, like all the way to the southern tip. They go like I have bees in mango orchards, avocado groves, and they literally are swarming every time of year.
And a tortoise sanctuary.
Yeah. But it's interesting, you know, I travel around to a lot of bee clubs and stuff. Down in Florida, everyone's always smiling because all their bees are alive. They've never bought a hive. They've never used a mite treatment. They've never had to feed bees. And they've never bought bees. They've never read a bee magazine, and everyone has more bees than they know what to do with. It's like beekeeping paradise there in Hawaii, you know. All because of forage, you know. Even if you're not going to be a beekeeper, plant bee forage. They need it. Bees are what they eat. If we can take some of their nutritional stress away by planting trees, things that are drought resistant, I mean, that's really going to help them cope with certain disease levels and mite levels and stuff. It's one of the best things you can do other than just having a hive in your backyard. And if you are, you kind of want to get a sense of like what your bees are doing and what their chances are going into winter, and so you can avoid having to buy commercial bees year after year. So I hope this all helped you out, and we can answer more questions and stuff, and good luck in your beekeeping.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So have you been stung today?
No. I got sticky though. It's even worse.
You ready for one?
I'll do a sting. We sting each other.
So it's going to help my arthritis, huh?
Yeah. It'll reverse it. It's clinically proven to reverse it. Everybody's different. It works holistically. It increases your cortisol levels, increases your white blood cell count. It's a pretty amazing medicine. Yeah, give me right here. Yeah. Not for everybody though.
I got stung 8 times one day.
Let Solomon get on in there.
I'm squeezing her head. She doesn't want to sting.
The bee might not survive this. Is she too young?
Gosh, you're way better at getting her to sting than me.
Yeah.
She's not interested.
I see the stinger coming out. Come on.
This is a good acupuncture point. Oh, now she's gearing up.
Gearing up. Come on, sweetie. She doesn't want to give up the ghost. Here, why don't you do this? Now you got it in the finger.
Yeah. There.
Got it.
Sticky. Pump.
This camera focuses like close.
Pump, 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 pump. Oh, I do wish we had some better bees to look at, but that's okay.
That was very educational for everybody.
It was educational.
That's great.
The good, the bad, and bugly, you know?
Good, bad, the ugly. Now I got a wasp on you, honey boy.
These bees are so calm. I don't know if they're queenless or not.
That was weird.
But
I was
mean,
like, oh no, everyone's gonna get stung. Close it up soon.
On like some of the frames, it looks like they're making room for a queen, but a lot of the frames they had nectar right in the middle of where she would lay, and that's usually a sign that they really are hopelessly queenless. But a lot of dead bees on the bottom, and that's no sign of queen cell. I think they're queenless actually.
Well, good thing we added some resources, huh?
Yeah, we'll see. Will they pull it off? Yeah, maybe. Depends on the weather.
So I had some wild bees building
Do you
a
want to
comb
give me
in
one?
a
Yeah, sure.
Is that the one that stung you
outbuilding
already?
doorway, about 10 feet off the ground.
Oh yeah.
So I'm gonna cut the comb off of cut the comb down and
there's
zip
an old
tight
one.
it to bars and put it in a top bar hive.
Let me get one. Give me one right on my pinky.
You ready for one?
I broke my pinky in January.
And who's first? Ray asked first. Right here? Usual spot? Right there?
Yep. Thank you.
Got it?
Yeah.
Good work. Freaks!
Some people sit around and drink.
Freaks and geeks.
Some people sit around and smoke weed.
We do it all and then get stung.
Alright, give me a bee for salt. Yeah. Treatment free, but not stupid.
Or whatever.
We got one. Right on the pinky? Right in the joint? Okay, on the knuckle. Ready? Here she comes.
Here she comes.
It's the anticipation that's the worst.
We're all thrill seekers here.
Any luck yet?
Nothing yet.
God, just sting them already.
These are the gentlest bees in the colony.
Yeah, for being queenless, she really doesn't want to sting. She might be too young.
Or
Damn.
full belly.
Oh, got it.
There you go.
There we go.
Aww.
It's almost startling after you're waiting for it for so long. It never happens, and then all of a sudden, whoa, there it is.
I gotta wash my hands. I hate being sticky,
Yours.
man. I didn't used to care about being sticky. It's developed over the years, you know?
I hate being sticky also.
Those years that it gets out of control, where like every doorknob, the steering wheel, the stick shift, the dog, like everything's sticky. Dogs laying in puddles of honey.
All right, that's all for today, y'all.